just to name it, that I know this time of the year can be difficult for many of us. And of course, while the cultural narrative, tends to emphasize the joy aspect, celebration, family, abundance, togetherness, unity, the amazement of a new pumpkin spice latte with a lot of oat milk, whipped cream, you know, which is its own archetype really, but maybe that we'll go into that some other time. But there's often a quieter, a more subtle story that's unfolding inside of us. The holidays have a way of opening a kind of portal, a threshold really into old feelings, into that which is unmetabolized, implicit memories, long buried images that we may not have been in conscious relationship for quite some time. And probably for very good reasons we haven't, as ways to protect ourselves, especially earlier in our lives, from overwhelming, fragmenting feelings and emotional activation that we simply did not have the capacity to digest, to assimilate, to integrate. And as we know, that's a very useful, a very skillful, a very intelligent, a very adaptive strategy at times. But what does happen is all of that material, of course, it doesn't go away. Where does it go? Well, it drops down into the deep somatic unconscious, deep into the body, into the cell tissue, into our muscles, into the way we breathe, into our eyes, into the muscles in our face, into our throats, into our bellies, into our hearts, where it's held, to use more neurophysiological language, in subcortical and bodily circuitry, really until the conditions are ripe for its integration, where there's a chance again that it can be held, that it can be metabolized, that it can be reworked, reorganized with the resources that we didn't have access to last week, last year, back in the 90s, back in the womb. I mean, for some of us, this portal can reveal, this holiday portal can reveal a deep loneliness. And for others, a strange confusion or fragmentation. And for some of us, even sadness or grief, longing, anger, rage. And we don't talk about this a lot, of course. It's the time for joy. But there's that heat that can be building, that heat of old disappointment, of not being seen, of unmet needs, of ruptures that were never repaired, early experiences of not being felt and understood, not being validated, not being given permission to be, not given our own sense of subjectivity, where we merely remained the object in the awareness of another. I mean, that's the very essence of sort of narcissistic organization. And there can also be just a subtle sort of anxiety or dread or a kind of restlessness or a sort of depression or melancholy or numbing that's sort of in the background, that's sort of coloring it. What is this? Family systems get activated, old relational wounds light up. Our attachment styles become, well, more and more obvious. And often what stirs is not only our personal material, but I think what we might call threads of the intergenerational matrix, the unspoken grief, the trauma, the longing that came before us, that we now carry in our bodies and our nervous systems. I mean, this is the intergenerational transmission of trauma. And it's a real thing. Is this my grief? Is it my shame? Is it my rage? Is it my confusion? Or is it mom's? Is it dad's? Is it my maternal great grandmother's? Is it my neighbor's? My ex-spouse's? My children's? Does it belong to my ancestors? Does it belong to my culture? Am I somehow carrying it on behalf of them, of the others, capital O? Or is it somehow just a part of the field itself? Does it belong to the earth, who also grieves? And even if we don't consciously participate in the holidays, if it's just not our thing, not interested, or we just feel indifferent or whatever, the season itself lives in the collective psyche. And as open, sensitive, relational beings, we are affected by the collective. There's a way, in my experience, that the archetypal field thickens at this time of the year. And many of us, many of you will feel this. It's like it's in the atmosphere, in the mythic sort of air that we breathe. And these forces, there's a way that they can make themselves known, or they can press. They can press in or press down on the heart and the body, the soma, the subtle body, in ways that can be sort of difficult to articulate and to sort out. I mean, for most in our world, we just sort of go along with it, We might feel activated or numb or shut down, worried or anxious, but we don't really take the time and the space to explore that. It usually just gets stuffed away, that stuffing process. We deny it, we stuff it, we repress it. I don't know. Or, of course, the other extreme, the other side is that we just get flooded by it in such a way, we fuse with it, we become enmeshed with it in such a way that we have no choice but to unconsciously act it out in ways that tend to create unnecessary struggle and suffering for ourselves and for others. But just to begin to open to the possibility, that the soul is speaking to us. It's using the portal of the holidays. It's using particular archetypal constellations to find us. And as to become curious, curiosity, I think I've said here before, is really if we had to pick one essential sort of quality to cultivate, we learn this from the alchemists. There is no alchemy, which is, we're speaking about a metaphor here for our own inner transformation, our own healing. There is no alchemy without curiosity. We have to find a way, and this takes a lot of experiments. We have to find a way to replace that very human, very natural, very understandable longing that we all have for relief, for a few moments. We can prioritize and privilege relief when we need to, of course, but to find some way, some time to replace that with that spirit of curiosity, to slow down and pay attention to what the body is telling us, remembering that the body, right, is the archivist, the library, to slow down and to pay attention to our dreams. Takes a little bit of effort. You have the pens, the notebook next to your bed. Maybe set the phone down. Maybe take the phone out of the room. I know that's maybe too much to ask these days. Set it down a few meters away, and have that dialogue with the muse. Show me, reveal yourself to me. Show me, what is it that I need to see right now? What is it that I need to know about myself, about this life, about where I'm heading? What is it that's needing to be tended to? Speak to me, O dream muse. Give me an image. Bring me a figure. Because there's something interesting, magical that happens when we sleep, because that ordinary ego functioning shuts down a bit, that censor, that commenter, that constantly we're commenting on our experience. There's that little voice inside, right, as we go through our day, who's constantly commenting, interpreting. But all of that sort of falls into the background during the dream state. That's why it's such an interesting state to work with. Now, there's also those same images, those same figures, those same landscapes and scenarios that are happening in the background awareness, just under the threshold of consciousness, even while we're in the waking state. The dream is always happening. We call it a dream when we're sleeping, but it's actually going on all the time. And through practices of attuning to the imaginal, through practices of what Jung called, right, active imagination and so forth, we can make contact with that dimension of experience, with the dream muse. Even just those sudden shifts that we have in mood, to a subtle aching in the chest, or a constriction in the throat, or some tightening in our belly, or especially some activation that we have in one of our relationships. Someone looks at us a certain way, someone says something rather innocuous, someone doesn't say something or doesn't look at us. Something, all of a sudden, there it is. That activation is there. Something is arising, something's longing, something's catching on fire that wants to be known, wants to be met, wants to be felt and heard and integrated and articulated. The heaviness that comes for no apparent reason, the numbing, the shutdown that we notice, the restlessness. We might begin to sense the ways that the soul is always speaking to us. It's always communicating to us as a way of drawing us back into relationship with those parts of ourselves that have been waiting. The door to the time machine opens, and the lost orphans are nearby, longing for breath, longing for warmth, longing to feel, felt, and understood, not to be cured, fixed, changed, not even to be transformed or healed, but finally to be felt and understood, to be seen, to be warmed up by our presence. Will it happen this time? Will it happen this time, they wonder? Or will he or she go back to sleep again?